Let's first look at the title. Although it's the first part of a brief, the title is often the last thing you write. But just because it's the last thing you write doesn't mean that constructing a good title should be taken lightly. It's the first thing your reader sees, and it needs to capture their attention and should generate interest in the content of the brief. In addition, good titles should be short. 10 to 15 words is enough. Using a provocative or surprising title is often helpful. For example, the Kentucky Policy Brief title is "The Price of Smoking." This is a play on words. The policy brief is about the actual price of cigarettes and proposes raising taxes on packs of cigarettes. At the same time, the title refers to the price people pay in terms of health when they smoke. The government and the society at large may also pay a price. The second section is called the key messages or summary. This is usually a 1 or 2 paragraph description of the problem and a statement on why change is needed. Typically, the key messages section also makes a short recommendation for action based on the policy analysis in the brief. Here, we see the key messages section of the Kentucky brief. The problem statement is one of the most important sections of the brief. Here you need to clearly identify the health issue that is the reason for the brief. You must convince the reader that there is an urgent issue that needs their attention. The problem statement describes 2 aspects of the health issue. The first is the health problem, and the second is the main modifiable driver of the problem, or the root cause. The root cause will ultimately be the target of your proposed policy options. The problem statement must describe the situation from a local perspective. Why is it a problem in this particular place at this particular time? It also has to quantify the problem. How much of it is happening? What's the burden? How does it affect public health? Sometimes the problem statement is crafted to appeal to a reader's emotions by emphasizing the human consequences of the problem. The problem statement also typically provides visual representations of data graphs, figures, and photos that demonstrate the problem and help the reader to understand its importance. It often includes local data, such as district or regional health data, and describes any previous efforts to address the issue and why they were insufficient. When it's appropriate, the problem statement provides data from a broader global or regional perspective as well. The problem statement can vary quite a bit in length, but it's typically 1 to 2 pages. This is part of the problem statement from the Kentucky Policy Brief, but in fact, the problem statement can be found throughout the brief. Notice that the authors provide several statistics demonstrating the size of the problem, which is defined as the smoking prevalence in Kentucky. Kentucky ranks first among all 50 states in smoking prevalence. Nearly a third of adults in Kentucky smoke, and compared to the national smoking prevalence of 21%. They note that high school students smoke more often than the national average, and that pregnant women also smoke at twice the national rate. They note that there's interest in stopping smoking by showing that nearly half of smokers have tried to quit, and show that 45% of children in Kentucky live in a home where an adult smokes, compared to a national average of 29%. Later on, the brief describes the estimated economic costs of smoking, which are more than $3.6 billion US. The fourth section of the policy brief is the policy options. The policy options section outlines and compares as many as 3 viable options to address the problem. It also explains the implications, advantages, and disadvantages of each option. The policy options section presents evidence for each option and analyzes the health and economic impacts. In the Kentucky Policy Brief, 2 options are considered: raising the tax per pack by 30 cents and raising the tax per pack by 70 cents. For each option, the authors estimated the impact on smoking, avoidable deaths, and health savings for youth and adults. At the bottom of the table, they show the overall long-term health savings in US dollars, comparing the two tax increases. The next section of the policy brief presents recommendations. The recommendations should be specific, feasible, and practical. In addition, they should be based on the data, evidence, and analysis presented in the brief.